Nathan Dean jumps in early this morning and says, good morning, another day of manifesting extensions for Trevor and Josh and maybe signing Tee Higgins.
It's not my money. Let's go.
The interesting part about Tee Higgins, I just don't think they're going to let him go. They've got power there with the franchise tag at like $21 million. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't you do that and try? I mean, you just extended Burrow. You didn't get to see enough about Burrow. So you're like, let's keep this thing together. We feel like we're pretty close already. Now let's get a year of healthy play. Why would we let him walk out the door?
Well, I mean, I know he's not the happiest in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it,
and
right?
I think he's made some comments in the past. And, yeah, if you franchise tag him, what's that going to do for the locker room? But, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, the guy's a supreme talent. Obviously helps Joe Burrow out a lot. Is a nice 1-2 punch with Jamar Chase. So if I'm Cincinnati, I do everything in my power, even franchise tagging him for a bit, try to work out a new contract.
So what's the balance there in your opinion from a locker room standpoint? Guy doesn't want to be here maybe. Guy would like to go be a number one guy. Guy would like to be paid. Everybody would like to be paid. But the organization has power. So do you use that power on an unhappy potential player?
He holds he has the power until he holds out. And then it kind of switches. I mean, he doesn't get paid.
Yeah.
Right? But then that kind of causes a distraction to your locker room. I mean, to me, if I'm Cincinnati, if there's another plan in place, then by all means, go do that plan. You know, I mean, I think back of like Stephon Diggs in Minnesota, right? Like when Stephon Diggs went to Buffalo, I was kind of like, what is Minnesota doing right now? You know, I mean, you're losing a high-caliber guy and everything, and what happens? Well, you replace him with probably an even better player in Jay Jettis. So if there's a plan in place, then by all means, go with that plan. But if not, your top priority is helping out your quarterback, and Tee Higgins helps out a quarterback.
Listen, Nathan says, only issue is given signing Higgins probably means we don't bring Calvin back. If they sign, they're certainly not bringing Calvin Ridley back if they sign Higgins. Like, I mean, it's one or the other.
You would take Tee Higgins over Calvin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I do, but I'll tell you this about Higgins, and I get it. And here's the thing that I like about T more than anything else. Playing with the fact they played with Trevor a little bit doesn't hurt this, but he's a different kind of receiver. He's a big receiver. The Jags really don't have that. They don't have a big guy to go get it. This guy will go get it. Look what he did down the stretch. Remember that catch that he made like in the corner?
Yep.
I mean, that's what he can do. Is he going to do that every time? No, because to start that game, people forget, but he dropped like a wide open pass, like 18 yards down the field. It's like, I guess a lot of people drop passes. It's not just the Jags guys. Because I remember that game specifically for that. I wonder, though, and is this a fair criticism of Higgins, to question whether he can be the one guy? Because you're probably going to have to pay him like the number one guy, $24, $25 million, maybe even north of that, which I think is kind of crazy for receivers. I think that's a dangerous thing with how many good receivers there are when you can find a Puka Nacua in the 5th round and he can have that kind of impact. I know not everybody does, but you can find impact receivers in the 2nd round, 3rd round, the draft. It's deep again this year. It's always going to be deep because of the nature of college football now. I question whether he can really take the mantle of a number one guy.
Let me ask you this, though. I mean, and you echoed Puka Nacua. Like, listen, every team wants to find their Puka Nacua, right? Every team wants to get a wide receiver deep in the draft and make that happen. The fact that it happened with Sean McVay is not a coincidence. Look at Cooper Kupp.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think some coaches are just better at developing talent and calling a system that's going to fit that player's needs. I mean, the biggest thing with Puka Nacua coming out of college was he's kind of slow, not the best route runner. If you get the ball in his hands, he's a big dude, so he can run over people. But, like, teams weren't sold on Puka Nacua. Well, guess what? He does exactly what the Rams ask him to do. We don't need you to be a burner. We're not going to throw it, 70 yards down the field. Now, he's had a couple of those, I feel like. But let's give you the ball in space. You lower your shoulder. You do your thing and get extra yards. I mean, I think he had the most yak yards of any wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken, this year. He had to be top 5. Yeah. With Tee Higgins, to me, it begs the question of, do you feel confident in the draft then? Do you feel confident bringing in a guy from the draft in the 2nd or 3rd round that's going to replace a Calvin Ridley, that could replace Tee Higgins? I'm not that confident. So, like, if that's the question, I think Tee Higgins gives you the best chance, talking about a 6'4", 219-pound wide receiver who can run the deep ball, who can do the jump balls, and then you pair that with a Christian Kirk, pair that with an Evan Ingram. Now you got something with a little bit of everything, right? You have the slot with Christian Kirk. You have the obviously the tight end, athletic tight end, Evan Ingram, and then Tee Higgins over the top. I'm not mad at that.
I do like that. Listen, I like the idea of being different. We're just talking about that with what San Francisco has. How do you not look at what these other teams have and you don't just say, I'll take 2 studs? Sometimes it's the puzzle pieces, how they go together. The beauty of what they did in L.A. is McVay basically convinced Snead, like, we need this guy. I know he doesn't measure up. I know he's not as fast. We need this guy. This is going to work. This is how I'm going to use him. This is what I see. Doug and company, they know that better, right? They know the nuances of Calvin Ridley after being with him for a year. They know if they can increase those or if they're just kind of praying that he gets better on those.
Well, and how much of a telling sign is it going to be even with a guy like Brenton Strange, who some would say that you drafted up a lot to get him. We haven't really seen a lot, but like his development, I think, is going to say a lot about the GM and the head coach of just how much this year he can come along and, be the guy they expect him to be.
Yeah, so so you have no questions about Tee Higgins being the number one guy?
No, I mean, I think you bring him in as the number one guy, I think he's going to do just fine.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I'm not trying to disrespect him. I just don't know if we know. We don't know. I mean, Jamar Chase is a dude.
Correct.
I mean,
yeah.
It's nice playing next to Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Like, you get a lot out of that. And then there's always that question when that guy has to go be that. He's not going to be Jamar Chase either way. He's just not. Mm-hmm. Jamar Chase is a different talent, in my opinion. But you're going to pay 20-something. Listen, we have this DK Metcalf. Metcalf, they paid like $24-25 million a year for.
Yeah.
Is he that guy? He's freak. I get it.
But are they asking him to be that guy when you have Tyler Lockett? When you have
well, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah,
maybe we don't have to ask that guy Tee Higgins to be that guy. But do you have to ask him to be that guy if you're paying him $25 million a year?
No, I mean, it justifies it for sure. But as long as that offense is humming, I don't care if he's getting 12 targets a game or 8 targets a game. He's getting over 100 yards and he's contributing. Then so be it. I'll bite that price tag all day. Like, to me, like, it's crazy how much it kind of reminds me of Stephon Diggs a little bit. Just because, like, he kind of had an attitude in Minnesota, didn't like what was going on, wanted to be traded. He gets traded to Buffalo. Is like, is that really going to be a good fit for Stephon Diggs? So keep in mind, like, the Stephon Diggs now in Buffalo, even though he kind of had a down year, wasn't the same Stephon Diggs in Minnesota, right? Because you had Adam Thielen, who's arguably maybe the one receiver, and Stephon Diggs was more of that deep threat, right? Kind of like Tee Higgins maybe a little bit. But what happens to Stephon Diggs? He goes to Buffalo and becomes the true number one wide receiver, and he was getting all the targets, all the looks. Now you have Gabe Davis come through a little bit as well. And once again, Stephon Diggs kind of struggled a little bit this year in a few games. But I think you could have the same kind of career that Stephon Diggs had in Buffalo as Tee Higgins could have in Jacksonville.
I think there's a couple of interesting things around a guy like Higgins or even the Ridley situation, which got everybody's every day it feels like Ridley this, Ridley that. It's an interesting conversation because I can talk you into something, you can talk me into something when it comes to Ridley. Again, they know more. What they know matters the most. What do they know behind the scenes? What do they know where he could go, where he can be? But I think Trevor is important in this conversation. He played with Tee Higgins. Does he love playing with Ridley? Does he see like that feedback? I don't think he's going to throw anybody under the bus, but I do think the feedback of Trevor is important here. And then I think the Jags have something to offer that not a lot of teams have. They have all these conversations coming up. I can see it popping up with Christian Kirk's name. There's so much belief in Christian Kirk, which, by the way, was a hell of a move by Trent Baalke and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know nobody wants to give credit to any good move, but Baalke went and got Kirk and how he's used with Doug and what he's done these 2 years and what they didn't do in his absence proved his worth. But his ability and Evan Ingram's ability, I think over these couple years in Doug's offense, really makes this feel like what is the best puzzle piece when it comes to Ridley, Zay Jones, a Tee Higgins. I know I just put like Zay in that category, but you get what I'm saying. How they want to use these other guys because they know this, Austin.
Yeah.
They've got 2 guys that they can rely on, and they've got 2 guys that they think are pretty good, and 2 guys that will excel. So, and not even counting Travis and everybody else, but
yeah.
I think it's really a puzzle piece for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have got to figure out which slides in the best. And this is really a Doug question more than a Trent question for me. Doug, which piece fits your offense the best?
I mean, listen, going forward, if you want to call, like, say they bring back Calvin Ridley, and let's say we have 1A, 1B at the receiver position with Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, that's fine. But, like, I'm looking at some of these games from Calvin Ridley, you can't have 1 reception for 5 yards like he did against the Saints. You can't have 4 receptions for 30 yards like he did against the Colts. You can't have 2 receptions for 38 yards like he did against the Falcons, right? Like, you have to be a little more consistent in terms of if you are a 1A or a 1B, whatever you want to call it, receiver, those numbers got to come up.
Yeah, I agree with you. You've got to show up, but go ahead and just for the heck of it, bring up Jamar Chase's number.
All right. Okay, I think he was hurt a lot last year.
Okay, well then bring up somebody else. Diggs we know disappeared a little bit.
I mean, not Tyreek Hill, obviously. You don't want those numbers.
No.
Those numbers would knock your socks. You want Devontae Adams? Is that fair?
Yeah, okay. Okay, go Devontae Adams. And I just want to see the consistency. And again, I would put Devontae Adams ahead of Ridley too, but
would you put the quarterback play in front of?
Well, that's fair.
Yeah. But let's just for the heck of it, Yeah, give me a second. Put me in this.
Kirk, by the way, just to reiterate here, Kirk and Ingram, in my opinion, like we're talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and I'm not trying to get crazy with it. San Francisco has a bunch of things, but we call them unicorns, we said, with guys like McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. Those guys are different. They do things in your offense as a puzzle piece that really nobody else in the NFL seemingly can do, and they've got two of them in the same offense. So how do you defend that along with some other good players as well? But the one thing I'm saying here is the Jags have something to offer in that department. The Jags have puzzle pieces already in place in their offense. They've got Kirk, who's done it, and you know what he can do. And I think in a slot, he's one of the better players in the National Football League, and he's really good in the red zone in that category. I think Ingram has proven that he is a big part of this. I think ETN is a good part of this. So this is puzzle piece. This isn't, hey, come in and change my offense. This is elevate the offense because you fit into my offense.
So to echo your point a little bit, you're not wrong here, Brent. If you want to go to the last 5 games, now keep in mind quarterback play was questionable at best. Last 5 games, they beat Denver, 5 receptions for 46 yards for Adams, 13 receptions for 126 yards, 1 reception for 4 yards, 8 receptions for 101 yards, and 7 receptions for 53 yards. That was the last 5 games.
Okay. Yeah, I think these guys go up and down. I think some of it's because of the defense that covers them. I don't know if like A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown might be a good example here. I feel like he's probably more consistent, but at the same time, the way they struggled down the stretch, did he disappear? Was it Jalen Hurts? There's a lot that goes into that. Calvin Ridley was inconsistent. There's no denying that. He was inconsistent. And he really wasn't. It didn't feel like he was as good as he could be or kind of told us he would be or looked like he would be. That's it. I mean, there's no denying that. The question is, can he get to where he almost was or could have been or told us he could be? That's what they've got to decide. But I will say this. You know what you have in Ridley in this offense. You've got to determine if a guy like Tee Higgins even becomes available, which I think there's questions on that. I don't think he is actually. How much better does Tee Higgins make your offense if you were able to pay him X amount of dollars? The bottom line is Ridley's going to be cheaper too.
No, so this is what I want to ask you then. How much more would you, assuming you think Tee Higgins is better than Calvin Ridley, I think we can all agree on that right now where they're at in their careers.
Especially because you can have him for another 5 years. Ridley's clock is ticking now. He's going to be 30.
Yeah. How much more would you pay then for Tee Higgins over Calvin Ridley?
Yeah,
we talking $5 million more a year, $4 million more a year?
I would say this. First of all, I think Ridley's like, I can get him for $16, $17 million, I think I'm in that neighborhood. If he gets up to 20, I'm out. I just don't feel like that's it for him. I do think in this case, if it means I can get like you're going to have to pay to play. You're going to have to pay like $23, $24 million, my guess, a year for a guy like Tee Higgins. I don't love that. But I really don't love $27, $28 million. I ain't paying that. I don't care. I'm going to draft somebody. That is not where I'm spending my dollars.
Especially if trying to bring back Josh Allen and eventually sign Trevor Lawrence as well.
Because I don't think it's worked very well. Like Devontae Adams hasn't changed the Raiders at $27 million a year.
How much is Tyreek Hill making?
Hill's a different animal. Okay. But again, he's a unicorn.
Sure.
Tee Higgins isn't Hill. Yeah. Metcalf for $24, $25 million isn't changing Seattle. Yep. You better change me. I'll tell you this, for Josh Allen for $27 million, he changes the Jaguars. You lose 17.5 sacks, what the hell would they have been? Like, for that kind of money, you have got to change the dynamics of my football team. So you've got to answer that question. We don't even know if Tee Higgins could be a number 1 guy.
Right now, looking up the highest paid wide receivers, Brent. Tyreek Hill coming at $30 million,
and he's worth it.
He's worth it, which is insane.
He's worth it.
Devonta Adams at $28 million.
Yeah, I don't think Devontae's been worth it.
Well, hard to say if you don't have a quarterback to throw him the ball.
I get it, but you're asking a lot. It's hard to meet that expectation.
Yeah.
And Devontae Adams is a brilliant receiver, But it's not like he does stuff that nobody else in the league can do. Yeah. Tyreek Hill does stuff that nobody else in the league can do. Nobody can run that fast. Nobody can move that fast. He changes your offense, your team. I want to stay on this Tee Higgins and Calvin Ridley stuff because Hamby just said something that was really interesting. Mm-hmm. These guys are like separated by 5 years by birth date. But Ridley's played only 8 games more than Higgins, which really says less about Ridley to me, because we know he lost essentially a year and a half to 2 years of his career before coming to the Jags. It says more about Higgins. He's a durable player. And if you're going to spend money, you like that durability, right? I mean, that's the first thing.
That's number one overall, yes. I mean, in terms of injury history, I'm not sure if Higgins really has anything serious. Obviously, he's played in a lot of games, so one would think he doesn't. Yeah, that's what coaches are always looking for.
Do you want? We've been talking about this for 20 minutes. You want to pay him? You asked me how much I'd pay him. You want to pay him? How does he fit?
I mean, I think he fits great once again. I think if you can keep, obviously, you have Christian Kirk for a couple more years. You have Evan Ingram. I mean, that's going to be a pretty dang good-looking offense, in my opinion. So if I have to pay him an extra, I mean, because Calvin Ridley wants top dollar. So if I got to pay Tee Higgins an extra $3 to $4 million a year, yeah, I'm considering it. But now, once again, I got to pay Josh Allen. I got to pay Trevor Lawrence eventually, right? So I got to make sure those books look okay. But if I'm bringing another guy, it's going to be Tee Higgins.
So the best part about this for me, now that you dissect it a little bit more, Trevor's 24 years old, and Tee is 25 years old. That's like for the next 4 or 5 years, that's your duo. You can really, that's what the Burrow and Jamar Chase thing has become. That was good vision on their part. Now, will it get them to the promised land? We'll see. That was really, maybe that was the not so great part of Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. Their contracts, their age, their everything else didn't really match. So it was pretty short-lived there, and now still took advantage. But I think that's what the Dolphins have tried to do with, say, the Tua and Waddle matchup, right? Going to get your guy a young wide receiver. Now Lamar has Zay Flowers for a long time. Do you need that guy, that young player on the outside that you continue to grow with? And obviously, again, the Tee Higgins connection is already there, which is very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get that guy at the price, Brent, why not? Now I'm not sure how much money, like you said, it's going to be a lot. But, do you think Tee Higgins wants to be a top 5 paid wide receiver? Probably, I guess, with the market, right?
I mean, listen, everybody wants to.
No, I know, but I'm saying, is it feasible?
I doubt it because, again, if you're starting at $30 million and then you're getting me to $28 million on Devontae Adams and then you're getting me to somewhere else, where do his numbers stack up to be able to say, oh, yeah, I'm worth this? There's market value, but then there's also a slot here at the receiver position where you go 28, 29, 30 million. Okay, that's one level, and that's a unicorn level.
Those
then
are two. Yeah, we have two guys there, Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams.
Who's third?
Third is Cooper Kupp, making $26 million a year.
Okay, and then who?
A.J. Brown, making $25.
Okay, so that's the category, probably 26, 25, maybe down to 24, like a DK Metcalf. See, I feel like he's more the DK Metcalf mold in terms of where the young player has accomplished a good amount but hasn't, set the world on fire, because Metcalf had accomplished a lot, but he also hadn't, he wasn't breaking records as far as I remember. So they took a gamble on him with a pretty good chunk of money. So that was the next tier down.
So if you're talking that tier, then the $24 million range, you're talking Stephon Diggs at $24 million, DK Metcalf at $24 million, Deebo Samuel at $23.8, and then Terry McLaurin at $22.7.
Yeah, that's, I think, where this lives.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Agreed.
I think it's somewhere in that $22 to $24 million.
Yes.
Are you willing to go there? That's it. Are you willing to go there? That's, and I do like the idea of being again, these guys, I would pay extra just for two things here. The durability part excites me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go 3. The age, or really, age is really part 2, because it's Trevor and Tee for the next 4 or 5 years together at 24 and 25 years old, entering this next phase of their NFL careers. I like that. That to me is worth extra money. Here's the deal. You bring Ridley back, you really got him for another year, maybe 2. There's no down the road vision on that. That's a right now vision. So I'd probably pay extra for that. But here's where you really got to figure it out. What's the draft like? Can you go find a 6'4", 220 guy that you think you can get for second round? And obviously the money would be a lot cheaper. Can you trust your evaluation that well? I'll tell you this, Trent Baalke has not been great when it comes to picking wide receivers. And he really hasn't done a lot of it anyway in his career as a GM.
You know, looking at this list real quick, Brent, about wide receivers making their money. Do you remember the outrage that was Christian Kirk getting his contract of $18 million a year?
I do.
Looking back on it now, I mean, you want some guys that are ahead of him right now that are making money? Brandon Cooks is making more money than Christian Kirk right now. Mike Williams making more money than Christian Kirk right now. Chris Godwin, who, is serviceable and has his moments, making more money than Christian Kirk. DJ Moore, obviously, making more money than Christian Kirk. So it's wild how every single year it fluctuates, and the price keeps going up and up and up. And, now all of a sudden that Christian Kirk deal, not so bad.
No, not so bad at all. We're getting some things from Nathan. I think Trevor and Travis could convince T that he's a long-term answer. It is interesting the Clemson connection doesn't matter. We have seen teams and quarterback and wide receiver duos around the league kind of join hands from their college teams. Again, Burrow and Chase come to mind from LSU, but it's not the only one as I remember it too. So there's some intrigue in that part of it. The relationships matter. You kind of recruit now, almost out loud these days in the NFL. And Trevor has a voice. I'm not sure Travis's voice is as big, but I think Trevor certainly would have a voice.
I mean, I think there's something to be said, too. I'm not sure if they're best friends, but, former college teammates, it can work out sometimes. Look no farther than Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Yeah, that's
I mean, Joe Burrow essentially got on top of the table and said, I want Jamar Chase here, draft him. They did, and worked out pretty well for him. He was right. I mean, he was right, but what would Penei Sewell look like? Would you be a little healthier? I mean, it's hard to say. But I think overall he was right, correct.
Yeah, that's a good argument to be had, and one that as that plays out. But, I mean, Chase is super dynamic, and he's good. It's not like he's a bust at all.
Correct. And meanwhile, the Lions are obviously liking what Penei Sewell can offer, their offensive line as well.
And as the GM said yesterday, they were begging for a quarterback at that time, and they got Penei Sewell instead.